Chapter 1. The Lamplight in the Fog. By the time evening begins to settle over the island terminal, the booth is already warm. It is not a large warmth, not the sort that fills a hall or pushes boldly into the damp air outside. It is a smaller warmth, held close by wood and glass, and the yellow lamp above the counter. It gathers in the corners of the booth, along the polished edge where hands rest, in the drawer fronts worn smooth by years of opening and closing. It lives in the quiet here, in the familiar stillness before the last hour begins. Beyond the windows, fog has come in from the water and taken its place among the pilings and lamps. It does not rush. It simply arrives and lingers, softening the far end of the pier, blurring the railings, turning each light outside into a pale halo. The terminal, seen through these small panes of glass, looks gentler in fog. Distances shorten, shapes become kind. The world beyond the booth seems to move more slowly, as if the mist has asked everything to lower its voice. Inside, the air carries the faint mixed scent of salt, damp wool left behind by earlier travelers, and paper that has spent all day in drawers. There is wood beneath it too, old and dry in places, cool and a little sea-sweet in others. If you rest here for a moment, if you let your attention settle as the evening settles, you can feel how the booth holds all of it together. The paper, the lamp, the counter, the sea just outside. Under the floorboards, from somewhere below the dock, a rope gives a slow creak against a cleat. Then comes the softer answer of water moving under the pilings, lifting and loosening itself in the darkening tide. These sounds do not interrupt the quiet. They are the quiet. They belong to the harbor the way breathing belongs to sleep. Regular, unhurried, always continuing whether noticed or not. The lamp on the counter casts a low amber circle over the wood. In that light, the grain of the counter shows itself in patient lines and loops, darker where years of sleeves and palms have polished it. Near the window, the brass edge of the service opening catches a dim glow. A little farther back, the stacked papers wait in neat order. Nothing asks to be hurried. Nothing is out of place. There is still time before the last ferry. Plenty of time. That certainty rests in the booth as steadily as the lamp rests on its hook. From outside comes the faintest suggestion of footsteps on wet boards. Then silence again. Perhaps someone crossing the terminal. Perhaps someone pausing beneath one of the lamps to look toward the water. The sound arrives softened by fog, by distance, by glass. Even the harbor's small movements seem wrapped in cloth tonight. A gull calls somewhere beyond the mist. The cry is brief and far off, not sharp enough to trouble the stillness. It drifts over the water and fades, leaving behind only the sense of open space beyond what can be seen. Sea beyond fog. Ferry route beyond terminal. stretching quietly outward. Yet here, within the booth, the world feels gathered and close. You can look through the front window and see the dock lamps reflected faintly in the glass, so that for a moment, the inside and outside overlap. Lamplight on the counter, lamplight on the wet railings. A pale glow in here, a paler glow out there. Between them, the thin, cool pane holding back the night air. At the edge of the service opening, the wood is slightly darker, where countless tickets have been passed through, one by one, over many evenings, very much like this one. There is comfort in that thought. Others have stood here in this same hour, with fog at the windows and salt in the air, listening to ropes creak below and waiting for the last travelers to appear. The work is small, and because it is small, it is easy to trust. A ticket offered, a question answered, a gentle nod, enough time. This way to the ferry. Another soft shift of water sounds below. The terminal answers with a tiny rattle somewhere in the railing outside, then settles. The fog moves almost invisibly, but its presence can be felt in the way the nearest lamp glows a little larger now, its edges more diffuse, its light spreading softly over the damp boards. Moisture beads at the corners of the outer glass. Not enough to run, only enough to catch the light when you turn your head. The booth door behind you is closed, and the latch sits easy in its place. The walls are close enough to feel sheltering, not cramped, but companionable, as if the booth itself understands the hour. There is a simple comfort in being here before the evening's little rituals begin, before the first ticket is lifted from its stack, before the first coin is counted into an open palm, before the soft, muted thud of the stamp becomes part of the night's rhythm. For now, there is only this beginning: the lamp, the counter, the fog at the glass, the smell of salt and paper, the water under the dock, moving in slow, dark folds, the rope giving now and then with a long, familiar creak, and beneath all of it, calm as a tide that knows its hour, the steady sense that the ferry will come, the passengers will arrive, and all that needs doing will be done in its own time. So the booth waits in its pool of amber light, and evening, patient and misted, gathers gently around it. Chapter 2. Opening the drawer, straightening the stack. Inside the booth, the lamplight rests where it did before, pooled softly over the counter, warming the grain of the wood until it seems almost honey-colored beneath the glass. Beyond the window, the fog still holds the terminal in its quiet hands. Nothing rushes. There is time yet before the last ferry. And in that time, the small evening tasks can unfold one by one, each in its own place, each with its own familiar weight. You reach first for the drawer beneath the counter. It opens with a low wooden slide, a sound so modest it seems to belong to the booth itself. as natural as the faint creak of rope below the dock. Inside, the compartments wait in their neat arrangement. Coins rest in shallow rows, silver and copper dimmed by use, their edges catching only the smallest glints of lamplight. Notes lie folded and flattened beneath the clip, already counted once, ready to be counted again. Your fingers move through them slowly, not because there is any need to hurry, but because slowness suits the hour. A few coins are lifted, set down, aligned. A stack of small bills is tapped gently against the wood to square the corners. The drawer smells faintly of metal and paper, and under that, the older scent of varnished timber that has held many evenings like this one. It is a comforting smell, dry and steady, softened by the salt air that finds its way in each time the window opens. Outside, somewhere on the planks, a pair of footsteps passes through the mist. Not close yet, just a hush of soles on damp boards, then less, then gone again. The sound leaves no urgency behind it. It only reminds the booth that the hour is moving forward in its patient way, and that before long, the first travelers will come to the window with their coats, carrying the cool of the fog. You close the drawer halfway, then open it once more, as if to reassure both yourself and the booth that everything is where it should be. Coins in their sections, notes beneath the clip, enough change for simple purchases, enough order for the evening to proceed without thought. Then the drawer slides shut, and the counter returns to stillness. Beside the ledger lies the stack of paper tickets. They are thick, matte, slightly fibrous at the edges, each one printed with the route and time in dark, practical lettering. You lift the stack in both hands and feel its small weight settle into your palms. The top few have shifted out of line, just enough to notice. With a careful tap against the counter, you straighten them. Once on the long edge, once on the short. The corners come flush, the stack becoming tidy and exact. A little block of order waiting in the lamplight. There is a quiet pleasure in this, in making things ready before they are needed. The tickets are set to one side, then moved slightly closer to the center, where your hand will reach them most easily. Not too near the edge, not too far from the stamp. The arrangement matters only in the gentlest sense, but that gentleness is enough. In a place this small, every object learns its resting place. Every evening, those places are found again. The stamp sits in its shallow tray, the handle smooth from years of use. You lift it, testing its weight in your palm. It is cool at first, then warming quickly. The rubber base carries the faint scent of ink, and when you set it down again, there is the softest little touch of wood on wood. You place it within easy reach of the tickets, angled just so, ready for the muted thud it will make later when the first fare is marked and passed beneath the window. Near the ledge rests the service bell, small and round, its metal dome dulled by sea air. It does not shine brightly. It glows instead, softly, as if it too has learned the harbor's preference for quiet things. You turn it a fraction so it sits square to the pane. It remains silent. Even its silence feels prepared. The booth settles around these motions. Glass gathers a little more condensation in the corners. The lamp hums, almost below hearing. From beneath the planks comes the gentle shift of water around the pilings. A slow, hollow sound, then a pause, then another. Somewhere farther out, a gull calls once through the fog, its voice softened by distance until it seems less like a cry and more like a memory of one. You smooth the blotter on the counter, straighten the pencil beside the ledger, rest your hand for a moment on the polished wood where so many tickets have slid across, where coins will soon click and settle, where damp sleeves may briefly brush the edge before moving on again toward the pier. The warmth of the booth holds steady against your palm. Outside, the world remains cool and silvered, railings beaded with moisture, lamps reduced to pale halos in the mist. Again, footsteps. This time, a little nearer, a slow approach, then a pause somewhere beyond the window, as if someone has stopped to read the timetable mounted on the post outside. The paper there will be damp at the corners by now, though still legible beneath its cover. Perhaps a coat rustles. Perhaps a hand brushes fog from a sleeve. The sounds are small, blurred by the glass and by the evening itself. You do not need to look up at once. There is comfort in finishing one small task before beginning another. The tickets are counted in a quiet whisper of cardstock. One bundle for the crossing, another for the return. A few extras beneath. The edges are aligned again with a gentle tap. The stamp remains waiting. The bell remains still. The drawer beneath the counter holds its ordered rows of change. And all around these simple preparations, the harbor continues in its low, familiar rhythm. Rope against cleat, water under wood, fog pressing softly at the panes. The booth, warm and lit, becomes a little more ready with each touch, each straightened stack, each object returned to hand's reach. Outside, travelers are beginning to gather in ones and twos. No more than shapes and softened footfalls for now. Inside, everything is prepared to welcome them gently. Chapter 3. The First Travelers from the Mist. Inside, everything is prepared to welcome them gently. So when the first traveler comes, it feels less like an interruption than the next small breath in the evening's rhythm. At first, there is only a shape moving behind the fogged pane. A dim gray outline passing through the halo of the lamp outside. Then, the door opens with its familiar, soft resistance, letting in a thread of cool air that smells of salt, wet wood, and distant seaweed. The traveler steps in carefully, bringing the weather in quiet traces. A dark coat beaded with mist, a cuff damp at the wrist, shoes that have crossed the slick planks of the pier. The booth receives all of it without fuss. The warmth holds. The lamp keeps its small amber circle over the counter. Water moves under the pilings below with the same patient hush as before. A hand reaches into a pocket. A voice, softened by the close wooden walls, asks for a ticket on the last ferry. Of course. The stack is already waiting near the center of the counter. The top pass, thick and cool to the touch. Fingers lifted free. The printed route, the hour, the small, neat letters all sit where they should. The stamp is taken up from its resting place, pressed once into the pad, then brought down with a muted, satisfying thud. Not loud, never loud, just enough to mark the paper and settle the moment. The ticket is slid across the wood. Coins answer with a small silver click. Then a softer glide as change is returned. The traveler nods in thanks, and the nod is almost as quiet as the fog outside. Then the door opens once more, and the coolness brushes in and out again, and the booth returns to its gentle enclosure. For a little while, there is only the harbor. Ropes creak below, rubbing against the dock with slow, familiar complaint. Somewhere farther out, hidden in the mist, a gull calls once and then thinks better of it. The sound fades quickly, as if absorbed by wool. Through the glass, the railings shine faintly with moisture. Each lamp along the terminal stands inside its own blurred ring of light. Beyond them, distance is only whiteness and suggestion. Then another set of footsteps comes along the boards. These are lighter, unhurried, approaching from the left side of the window. A pair this time. Their shapes gather gradually out of the fog, first as movement, then as shoulders and hats, then as faces made warm by the lamp as they draw near. When they step to the window, tiny droplets glimmer on a scarf fringe and on the brim of a cap. One of them smiles before speaking, as people often do when they have found shelter and the right place at once. 2 for the ferry? Yes, there is still time. That reassurance is offered simply, almost as part of the exchange itself, and it settles them. Shoulders lower. Gloves are tugged free, finger by finger. A purse opens. The tickets are counted out from the stack, one, then another. Stamp, pad, muted thud. Stamp, pad, muted thud. The rhythm is nearly identical to the one before, and that sameness is its own comfort. The paper passes slide over the counter. Coins are counted back into waiting hands. Thank you, they say softly, and the words leave a little warmth behind after the door closes. Outside, their footsteps recede in the direction of the gate, softened almost at once by damp air and distance. It is pleasant to imagine them joining the small cluster of waiting passengers farther down the pier, each person keeping to their own pocket of lamplight, each one content to stand with the sea nearby and the crossing still ahead. booth grows still again. The stamp is returned to its place. The edge of the ticket stack is tapped lightly against the counter to keep it square. One coin in the drawer is turned so its face lies flat with the others. These are tiny movements, not necessary in any urgent way, but natural, like smoothing a blanket or straightening a sleeve. Outside, the fog presses softly at the glass, without ever seeming heavy. A muffled announcement drifts over the terminal then, blurred by distance and speaker static, until it becomes less a message than a tone of reassurance. The words are not all distinct, but they do not need to be. The harbor understands itself. The passengers understand enough. The evening continues in its measured way. Another traveler appears. This one pauses first at the window, peering in with the mild uncertainty of someone checking they have come to the right booth. A face emerges from the mist, cheeks pink from the cool air, hair darkened slightly by damp. When the window is slid open a little wider, the smell of rain-wet fabric and salt enters with the voice. "One ticket, please." "Certainly." The same motions answer. A single pass lifted free. The pleasant weight of cardstock between finger and thumb. The stamp's quiet mark. The brief exchange of coins. The ticket laid down on the polished wood, where the lamp makes its edges glow pale gold. The traveler gathers it with visible relief, as if this small rectangle of paper has confirmed not only the journey, but the evening itself. The ferry will come. The dock will hold. The crossing will happen in its own good time. There is gratitude in the smile, in the slight incline of the head. Then the door opens, closes, and leaves behind only the faintest stirring of cooler air. Now the pattern is established. A figure in the fog. The soft approach. The opening of the door, or the quiet request at the window. Damp sleeves, low voices, the smell of the harbor clinging gently to wool and canvas. Ticket, stamp, slide, coins, change, thanks, a nod. Then back to the pier, where footsteps fade into mist and lamplight. Between each arrival, the water goes on breathing beneath the dock. And inside the booth, held in wood, paper, and amber light, each traveler is welcomed, as if there has been all evening waiting just for them. Chapter 4. Muffled announcements over the water. After that, the rhythm widens a little, though it never loses its hush. More shapes begin to gather beyond the small panes of glass. They do not arrive all at once. They appear gradually, as if the fog is remembering them and setting them gently back down at the edge of the terminal. A shoulder first, then the dark line of a coat, then the pale oval of a face under a hood or cap. The lamps along the pier turn every railing into a wet thread of gold. And now and then, a hand slides along one of those shining rails before its owner reaches the booth window. Inside, the lamp keeps its steady circle on the counter. The tickets remain in their neat stack. The stamp rests where it should, close to hand. Coins wait in their shallow compartments, silver and copper dimly bright. Everything is ready. And because everything is ready, each small exchange can remain simple. A traveler steps up and asks softly for a single fare. The voice arrives through the half-open window with a little breath of cool air and salt. You draw one ticket from the stack. The cardstock is thick and faintly rough against your fingertips. The stamp lifts, pauses, and comes down with its familiar, muted thud. Ink meets paper. The ticket slides across the wood. Coins answer with their own small music as change is counted and placed into an open palm. Then the window is clear again for a moment. Beyond it, the terminal seems fuller than before, but only by degrees. No one crowds. No one hurries. There are simply more quiet figures moving through the mist, each carrying a little weather with them. Damp hems, darkened shoulders, a scarf beaded with fine droplets, shoes making that soft, brushed sound on wet planks as they cross from lamp glow to fog and back again. From somewhere above the dock, or perhaps from the terminal roof where the speaker is mounted, an announcement drifts out over the water. It is impossible to catch every word. The fog takes the edges of the voice and rounds them off. The speaker itself gives the sound a soft grain, as though the message has traveled through distance even before it reaches the air. Still, the meaning is plain enough. The last ferry is expected. Boarding will come in good time. Passengers may proceed as directed. The voice fades, and the harbor receives it. For a few seconds after, it seems to linger in the mist like breath on glass. No one reacts with alarm. No one needs to. The announcement belongs to the evening, the way the ropes do, and the lamp glow, and the smell of wet salt wood. It passes through the terminal and leaves it just as calm as before. Another pair comes to the window. 2 tickets, a few folded notes, slightly softened from being held in a warm pocket. A question, asked in a low tone, about which side of the pier the ferry will come to. You answer just as quietly, with a small gesture toward the right, where the dock extends into whiteness. A nod follows. Gratitude follows the nod. The stamp comes down twice. 2 tickets slide over the counter. The pair moves on, their footsteps fading into the patient shuffle of others. Again, the harbor fills the pause. Water moves below the pilings with a slow, hidden sound. Less a splash than a shifting. Ropes creak against the dock in long, easy notes. Somewhere farther out, a gull calls once. The sound softened until it seems less like a cry than a pale mark on the air. The booth glass holds a faint bloom of condensation in its corners, and beyond that blur, the lamps continue to shine on railings, puddles, and the dark grain of soaked boards. Another traveler, then another. A hand reaches in with exact change already counted. A sleeve leaves a small crescent of damp on the counter edge where it briefly rests. Someone asks if there is still time, and the answer is as it has been all evening. Yes, certainly, there is still time. The words seem to settle people as soon as they are spoken. Shoulders lower, faces soften. Tickets are accepted with that same quiet relief, as though the booth itself is a kind of shelter, not only from the weather, but from the need to wonder. The motions repeat, and because they repeat, they become even gentler. Lift the ticket from the stack. Feel the slight resistance as paper separates from paper. Bring the stamp down in its soft, padded thud. Count the coins. 1, 2, 3, and a smaller one after. Slide them across the polished wood. Answer a question about departure, about boarding, about whether this is the right place. Yes. Yes, this is the right place. Yes, the last ferry will be here. Yes, there is enough time. Outside, the line shortens and lengthens by only a person or two at once, never becoming a crowd so much as a loose, breathing arrangement of waiting. The terminal has a fuller feeling now, but still it stays orderly, almost drowsy in its own way. The fog keeps every sound from traveling too far. Even the nearest footsteps arrive softened. Even the speaker, when it murmurs again with another blurred announcement, sounds as though it is speaking from behind a curtain of wool. Inside the booth, the world remains close and knowable. Wood under lamplight, ink drying on cardstock, the cool brush of outside air each time the window opens wider, the faint metallic scent of coins, dampness near the sill, warmth near the lamp, the familiar placement of everything your hand might need before it even reaches. And so, the evening continues in this calm middle hour. Passengers emerging one by one from the mist. The harbor speaking in creaks and water shifts below. The announcements passing overhead like low remembered phrases. And each small task returning you to the same quiet center. Here's the ticket. Here is your change. Yes, there is still time. Beyond the glass, the wet railings shine. Beneath the dock, the water keeps moving. Inside the booth, the lamp burns steadily on. Chapter 5. Coins, cardstock, and warm hands. Beyond the glass, the wet railings still shine in their soft gold lines. And beneath the dock, the water keeps up its patient shifting. A sound so steady, it has almost become part of the booth itself. Inside, the lamp burns on over the counter, warming the wood to a mellow amber and drawing every small object into its circle. The stack of thick tickets, the stamp resting on its side, the open drawer with its neat rows of coins, the pencil beside the ledger. The air in here is warmer than the air outside, by only a little, but the little is enough. It gathers in the hands. It lingers in the boards. It stays in the paper. The tickets have their own feeling, familiar now with every pass of the evening. They are not flimsy things. They are firm and matte, with a slight grain that catches at the pads of the fingers. When one is lifted from the stack, there is a soft drag of paper against paper, a dry whisper inside the lamplight. The edges are square and cool at first. Then they warm quickly as they are held. Route, time, fare, all printed plainly. Nothing complicated. Just enough information to guide someone gently onward across the water. A few coins are counted from one side of the drawer to the other. Silver to silver, copper to copper. Their sounds are small and rounded in the booth, never sharp. A coin laid down on wood gives a mild click. Two coins together make a quieter note than one might expect, softened by the air, by the hour, by the old timber that has listened to such sounds for years. When change is slid across the counter, it moves with a faint brushing sound, then comes to rest near the warm edge of the lamp's glow. Someone approaches the window, not quickly, only with the easy pace of a person who has already accepted the weather and the evening. Their coat carries in the smell of mist and harbor water. Tiny droplets cling to the dark wool at the shoulders. One hand, when it comes to rest on the counter ledge, is cool from outside. Still in time? The traveler asks softly. There is no need to look at the clock for long. There is still time. There has been time all evening, enough for each person to arrive as they do, enough for paper to be lifted and stamped, enough for coins to be counted without hurry. Yes, comes the answer, as gently as the lamp burns. Plenty of time. The traveler's shoulders seem to lower a little at that, as if they have set something down. A ticket is drawn from the stack. The stamp is lifted. Its handle fits easily into the hand, smooth from use. Then the familiar muted thud, more felt than heard. Ink meets cardstock. The marked ticket is slid forward across the wood. A few coins come back in exchange, dampened only slightly by the coolness of the traveler's fingers. Thank you, they say. And because the evening is made of such simple offerings, the thanks settles warmly in the booth and remains there for a moment after the traveler has gone. Outside, footsteps recede along the planks, each one softened by wet wood and fog. Somewhere farther down the pier, a gull calls once, then is quiet again. The ropes below answer the movement of the tide with a low creak against cleats. The harbor never stops speaking, but it speaks in a language of hushes. Another passenger arrives after a little while, bringing a small drift of cooler air through the half-open window. This one has gloves tucked into one pocket and a scarf darkened at the edges with mist. Their fingertips, when they set down the fare, are pink with cold. Sorry to keep you, they murmur, though there is no lateness in it, no trouble. There's no trouble at all, comes the reply. You're right on time. Again, the same motions. Lift the ticket. Feel the grain. Align the edge with the counter by habit more than thought. Press the stamp. Hear the soft, contained thud. Take the coins, count the change, slide it back. The traveler gathers ticket and coins in warm hands for only a second before tucking them away. And in that second, there is something quietly tender in the exchange. Warmth meeting coolness, shelter meeting weather. One small certainty passing from one person to another. When the window is still again, the counter keeps the memory of these brief contacts. A faint crescent of damp where a sleeve brushed the wood. A little coolness where coins had rested before they were sorted. The paper stack, 1 or 2 tickets lower than before. The drawer eased shut, then opened again later with the same low wooden glide. The announcements drift once more over the terminal speakers, blurred by distance and fog, until the words are nearly part of the wind itself. The last ferry, boarding from the right side of the pier, expected soon. Nothing urgent in the sound. Only information carried gently across water and railings and the small panes of glass. Inside the booth, usefulness becomes its own kind of rest. There is comfort in knowing where the stamp sits without looking. Comfort in the weight of coins in the palm, in the texture of the cardstock, in the little practiced reach toward the ledger, the drawer, the stack. Each object waits where it should. Each motion returns to its place. The work asks for no strain, only attention. And attention at this hour is a soft thing. Another ticket is sold, then another. One traveler offers exact change with a relieved little smile, and the coins arrive in a careful row. Another receives change and cups it in both hands, warming metal between the palms before slipping it into a pocket. A quiet thank you, a nod, a glance toward the fog-veiled pier. Then they move on, and always, after each exchange, the booth settles back around the clerk, like a coat around the shoulders. Lamp on wood, salt in the air, water below. The window framing mist and light and passing figures. The sense, steady as the tide under the pilings, that it is good to be here for this, to hand over what is needed, to say there is still time, to let each traveler continue into the evening carrying one small square of paper and a little more ease. Chapter 6. The Harbor Between Arrivals. Then, for a little while, no one comes to the window. The quiet is not empty. It has shape to it. It settles in the booth the way the lamplight settles, slowly and without effort, gathering in the corners, resting along the edge of the counter, touching the stack of tickets until their pale edges glow softly. The drawer remains slightly warm from recent use. The stamp sits near the ledger where it was last placed, its handle dark and smooth, waiting without impatience. Outside the half-open window, the fog has thickened just enough to turn the terminal into a world of softened outlines and patient light. You can hear the harbor more clearly in these pauses. Below the planks, water moves under the dock with a low, steady hush, lifting and loosening against the pilings. It is not a loud sound, only a repeating one. A small wash and fold, a gentle pressing and release. From time to time, a rope creaks against a cleat, the sound old and familiar, wood and fiber answering the tide. Somewhere farther out, hidden by the mist, a buoy bell gives a soft, hollow note. It arrives blurred by distance, rounded by fog, and then fades back into the same pale quiet from which it came. Inside the booth, everything keeps its place. The ledger lies open to the evening page. The pencil rests in the fold. A few coins remain near the till, where they were counted and returned, their surfaces dim in the amber light. The tickets are still square and neat. One stack for the crossing, one smaller stack for return fares that may or may not be needed before night settles fully over the harbor. The wood beneath your hand is smooth from years of use, worn satin soft where palms have rested, where papers have been slid across, where countless small transactions have passed from one person to another, and then on into memory. The glass panes hold tiny beads of condensation in their corners. If you look through them, the world beyond is reduced to simple things. A lamp halo suspended in white air, the dark rail of the pier, the brief, drifting shape of someone moving farther off than the booth. Perhaps already ticketed. Perhaps simply walking slowly toward the right-hand side, where the ferry will come. Shoes make only a softened sound on the damp boards. A coat hem passes. Then nothing moves for a while, and the fog closes gently around the stillness again. This lull has its own rhythm, not the rhythm of questions and answers, or coins counted into a waiting palm, or the muted thud of the stamp on thick paper. Another rhythm now, one made of listening, of waiting without strain, of knowing that the evening is continuing exactly as it should, whether the window is occupied or not. There is still time. The thought returns as naturally as breathing. Plenty of time for those not yet arrived. Plenty of time for the ferry to emerge from the mist in its own hour. Plenty of time for the harbor to keep making its quiet sounds. A gull calls somewhere deeper in the fog. The cry is softened before it reaches the booth, less a sharp sound than a pale thread of one, trailing over the water and dissolving above the roofline. Another answers from farther away. And then there is only the buoy bell again, patient and far, and the slight tapping of moisture from the eaves. The air through the cracked window carries the smell of salt and wet wood, with a faint trace of engine oil from the harbor, and the green, tidal scent that rises when the sea presses close to pilings and stone. You rest a hand near the tickets and feel the contrast between inside and out. Inside, the booth holds warmth in its boards, in the lamp, in the small enclosed breath of paper and varnish and old timber. Outside, the mist moves cool and fine through the terminal, touching railings, benches, sleeves, the tops of shoes. The two worlds meet at the counter's edge. at the service window, at the threshold where paper passes from dry hands to damp ones, and back again. It is a gentle border, nothing harsh about it, only a quiet exchange between shelter and weather, between waiting and crossing. Another announcement drifts faintly over the terminal, so softened by distance and fog that the words are nearly part of the air itself. A mention of the last ferry, a reminder of the boarding side. The speaker crackles once, then settles. No one hurries. No urgency follows. The harbor receives the sound and folds it into everything else. The water below, the ropes, the bell, the far gull, the breath of mist against glass. You glance at the clock without concern. The hands have moved, of course, but gently, as if they too understand the pace of this place. The evening has deepened by degrees rather than steps. The lamp seems warmer now against the whitening window. The countergrain appears darker where the light does not reach. Beyond the booth, the nearest pier lamp glows in a round gold cloud. And beyond that, there is only suggestion. The line of the dock, the harbor mouth somewhere unseen, the open water waiting beyond the island's edge. Still, no one comes for a little longer. And so the booth becomes even more itself. A small room of order at the water's edge. A place where each object can be noticed again, as though for the first time. The stamp at rest, the paper corners aligned, the drawer closed but ready, the bell near the window silent and faintly shining. The silence between arrivals is not a gap in the evening, but part of its weave, as necessary and comforting as the exchanges themselves. The water shifts below. The rope answers. The buoy bell sounds once more, distant and kind. And in the warm booth, with fog at the panes and lamplight on the wood, you wait in the most restful way, listening as the harbor breathes around you. Chapter 7. The Last Few Tickets. The next footsteps take a little longer to arrive. That is how the hour begins to change. Not all at once, and not in any way that asks to be noticed quickly, but in the lengthening spaces between one soft transaction and the next. The booth remains just as it has been. Warm wood under the lamp, the counter smooth beneath your hand, the stamp resting near the ledger, the neat stack of tickets waiting with their pale edges aligned. Outside, the fog still leans close to the windows, and the harbor keeps to its patient sounds. Water shifts below the pilings. A rope gives a small, familiar creak. Somewhere farther out, softened by mist, a gull calls once, and then lets the quiet close again. You stand within the same amber circle of light, and the terminal beyond it feels a little more spacious now. A pair arrives together, not hurried, only a little later than the others. You hear them before you see them. Two sets of footsteps on the damp boards, gentle and uneven in the way footsteps become when people are speaking softly to one another. Their shapes gather at the window, as if the fog is setting them down with care. Moisture pearls on a coat sleeve, on the edge of a scarf, on the brim of a hat darkened by mist. 2 for the last ferry. Their voices are low, almost part of the evening itself. You reach for the stack, separating 2 tickets with your thumb. The cardstock has its familiar thickness, cool at first, and then warmer in your fingers. You place them on the counter, stamp them one after the other with the same muted thud, and slide them forward through the pool of lamplight. Coins follow, counted without haste, the small silver sound softened by the wood. Change returns across the counter with a quiet glide. There is still time, you tell them, as you have told the others. The words settle easily. They always do. One of them gives a grateful nod. The other, a small smile, already half turned toward the pier. Then their footsteps recede, close together, absorbed by the fog as they make their way to the right, where the dock extends into whiteness and waiting water. When they are gone, the booth feels gently larger for a moment. Not emptier in any lonely sense, only wider, as if each completed exchange leaves behind a little more room for stillness to rest. You straighten the remaining tickets, though they scarcely need it. The top edge is already square. Still, there is comfort in touching the stack, in feeling the resistance of paper against paper, in aligning corners that have almost not shifted at all. The stamp returns to its place beside the ledger. Your hand rests briefly on the counter, where the wood holds a little warmth from the lamp. Beyond the glass, a lamp on the railing glows as a pale orb, its edges blurred by moisture. Droplets gather in the lower corner of the pane, trembling faintly whenever the door moves, or a breeze finds its way around the booth. The harbor remains close and quiet. Water brushes the pilings in a slow, folded rhythm. After another pause, a lone traveler appears. This one comes without any voice preceding them, only the soft approach of shoes on wet planks. At the window, they pause to brush a sleeve, wiping away a fine sheen of fog, as though the mist has settled there like dust. Their coat carries the cool scent of outside air into the small opening at the window. Salt, damp wool, the clean mineral smell of wet wood. 1 ticket, they say. You nod and lift a single pass from the stack. The motions are so familiar now that they seem to unfold by themselves, each one arriving in order, each one leaving its own small calm behind. Ticket, stamp, slide forward. A few coins placed on the counter, the answering glide of change. The traveler cups the ticket in one hand, as if receiving something warm. Last ferry? They ask, not with worry, only to hear the certainty aloud. Yes, you say, plenty of time. That answer, too, has become part of the booth. It belongs here among the lamp glow and the ledger lines and the low sound of water under the dock. The traveler inclines their head in thanks, then turns, and the fog receives them in the same gentle way it has received everyone tonight. Again, the quiet returns, deeper by a small degree. You listen to it. You can hear the terminal breathing in these pauses. A board settles somewhere along the pier. The service bell sits untouched near the window, catching a dim crescent of light. The drawer remains slightly warm from the room, coins sorted in their shallow compartments, silver and copper, waiting without any urgency to be counted again later. The pencil lies in the fold of the ledger, ready, though there is little left to mark. One more figure comes to the window after a while, pausing first just outside, a shape behind the fogged pane. Then the face resolves softly in the lamplight. This traveler does not ask for a ticket immediately. Instead, they lean just enough toward the opening to ask the departure time, quietly, as if not to disturb the hush that is gathered over the terminal. You tell them. They repeat it once to themselves, nodding, and then ask for a single ticket. The familiar paper leaves the stack. The stamp meets it with its muted, padded sound. You pass it over, and they thank you in the simple, sincere way people do at this hour, when voices grow softer and gratitude takes up less space. Then they are gone as well, footsteps fading toward the pier. Now the stack is lower, not by much, but enough to see the evening in it, enough to feel the hour settling farther down around the booth, like fog settling along the railings and over the water. You smooth the top ticket once with your fingertips. Outside, the lamps continue to glow on wet wood. Below, the ropes creak and release. The harbor keeps its slow, repeating music. And inside the booth, with longer pauses opening like gentle breaths between each arrival, you remain in the warm light, ready for the last few who will come, certain that each one will reach the window in time. Chapter 8. Footsteps fading along the pier. The next footsteps that come are softer than the ones before, as if the fog has laid a little more hush over the planks outside. You hear them before you see them, a measured tread on wet wood, then the faint pause at the window, then the shape of a traveler gathering itself out of the pale blur beyond the glass. A sleeve is brushed once, lightly, as though to clear away the mist. A quiet question about the departure time. The same answer you have given all evening, low and easy, that there is still time. Yes, plenty of time. The ticket is lifted from the remaining stack. Its edges are cool against your fingers. The stamp comes down with its familiar muted thud, a sound so often repeated now that it seems less like an action than a pulse within the booth itself. The traveler's thanks is small and warm. Then the ticket passes across the wood, and the traveler turns toward the right, where the dock extends into whiteness and lamp glow. For a little while after, you can follow the departure only by sound. Footsteps move away along the pier, each one softened by damp boards and distance. They do not hurry. They simply continue, growing lighter, thinner, until they are folded into the fog with the water sounds and the faint creak of rope below. Somewhere farther out, a gate opens with a careful metal shift, then settles back with no more than a softened click. The sound drifts over the harbor and reaches the booth, already gentled by mist. You remain where you are, one hand resting near the stamp, the other near the drawer. The lamp above the counter seems warmer now that fewer shadows pass the window. Its amber circle gathers the tickets, the ledger, the pencil, the little rows of coins, and turns them all into familiar islands of light. Beyond that circle, the corners of the booth are dim and restful. The glass at the edges has begun to cloud with a fine breath of condensation, so that the outside world appears not only foggy, but slightly dreamlike, as though seen through memory as much as through weather. Another traveler comes, and then perhaps one more after that. Each arrival is quiet enough to feel almost like a continuation of the harbor, rather than an interruption to it. A hand sets down coins. They click softly, silver against wood, then slide a little under your fingertips before finding their place in the drawer. Change returns across the counter with the same patient motion. A ticket is stamped. A nod is exchanged. Damp air enters briefly at the half-open window, carrying salt and wet wool, and the faint mineral scent of the sea. Then settles again into the booth's dry paper warmth. Each time someone leaves, the stillness that follows is a little larger. You begin to neaten what remains without any need to rush. The stack of unstamped tickets is squared by tapping its edges gently on the counter. The used blotter is moved a little farther from the ledger. Coins are turned so that their faces lie flat in their shallow compartments. Silver with silver, copper with copper. A folded note is smoothed once and tucked under its clip. The motions are small and ordinary, but in the quiet, they feel complete, as if the evening is folding itself neatly around them. Outside, the terminal has thinned to scattered movement and aftersound. No cluster of waiting voices now, only the occasional murmur that rises and is immediately absorbed by fog. A shoe sole brushes the planks. A distant throat clears. Somewhere along the right-hand dock, another careful opening of the gate, and then the sound of steps continuing beyond it. Farther toward the ferry you still cannot see. Everyone has found the way by now. Even without watching, you can feel it in the untroubled rhythm of the pier. The lamp reflects faintly in the window glass, so that your own small booth appears doubled. One warm room within another warm room, both suspended at the edge of the harbor. Through that reflection, the outside lights glow as blurred gold beads along the railings. Wet wood catches and releases their shine. The fog moves so slowly, it seems almost still. Yet every now and then, a shape softens, shifts, and disappears into a paler whiteness. You listen to the water under the pilings. It has been there all evening. But now, with so little else to compete with it, its movement seems fuller. It lifts and settles against the wood in long, quiet breaths. A rope gives a familiar creak below, then rests. From farther out comes the rounded note of a buoy bell. Not loud, only present, as if the harbor is speaking to itself in sleep. No one comes to the window for several minutes. In that pause, the booth becomes more enclosed, more tender in its stillness. The counter's grain shows under the lamplight, softened by years of hands and paper and weather carried in on sleeves. The stamp rests beside the ledger, dark-handled and patient. The remaining tickets are fewer now, their pale edges lined up cleanly. The drawer sits half-closed, not hidden, not fully put away, simply waiting in the same calm manner as everything else here waits. Then, one final set of near footsteps approaches, slower than the rest, and stops at the window. A voice asks only for confirmation, gently, almost apologetically, and you answer as before. Yes, this is the last ferry. Yes, there is time. The reassurance lands easily. A ticket is taken, stamped, passed over. Gratitude flickers in the traveler's face like lamplight on wet boards. And then they, too, turn toward the right. Their footsteps fade along the pier. You listen until they are no longer footsteps at all, only part of the harbor's soft collection of sounds. Water, rope, a distant gate, a voice too far away to make out, and then even that dissolving into fog. Inside the booth, the lamp glows steadily on the wood, and the evening, now nearly emptied of arrivals, settles around you like a blanket gently drawn close. Chapter 9. A booth of light at the water's edge. The blanket of quiet remains where it has settled, light and warm. And within it, the booth feels smaller in the most comforting way. Not cramped, not closed in, only gathered. A little square of amber at the water's edge. A place with 4 panes of glass. A wooden counter worn smooth by hands and sleeves, and years of patient evenings. And the steady knowledge that almost everything for tonight has already been done. At the corners of the window, condensation has begun to gather more thickly. It pearls there in tiny beads, then loosens and drifts downward in slow, uncertain threads. Beyond the glass, the fog receives the lamplight and gives it back, softened, turning the nearest rail into a dim, golden line, and the farther pier into almost nothing at all. The dock to the right is still there, of course. You know its boards, its cleats, its gate, the shape it makes as it reaches out over dark water. But now it is known more by memory and by sound than by sight. Inside, the lamp keeps its small promise. Its shade glows honey yellow. Its light rests on the counter, on the ledger's open page, on the remaining tickets stacked neatly with their pale edges aligned. The stamp lies beside them, dark-handled and still. Earlier in the evening, it rose and fell with a soft, dependable thud. Now, it simply rests where you left it, useful even in its silence, as though the shape of the work remains in it, after the work itself has slowed. You place your hand on the counter for a moment and feel the familiar grain beneath your palm. The varnish has long since softened under years of touch. Near the ticket window, the wood is satin smooth, polished by elbows, fingertips, coins set down and gathered up again. Farther back, where the light fades a little, the grain rises more distinctly. Tiny ridges and lines, like the memory of the tree still held in the board. The warmth from the lamp has settled into it. So has the faint, damp coolness that comes and goes each time the window has been opened to the harbor air. The drawer is nearly closed, but not latched. When you ease it open by an inch, the coins answer with the gentlest shift, silver and copper, making a sound no louder than a teacup being set carefully on a saucer. Everything inside is already in order. The larger coins in their row, the smaller ones beside them, the folded notes held flat. You slide the drawer shut again without hurry, and the little wooden sound it makes seems to belong with the water under the pilings and the occasional creak of rope below. No one comes to the window just now. That absence does not feel empty. It feels complete in its own way, like a sentence that does not need another word. The booth has spent the evening receiving people, one by one, out of the mist. And now it keeps the shape of those small exchanges after they have passed. A question asked softly, a ticket lifted from the stack, the muted press of the stamp, coins counted into a waiting hand, the reassurance, given more than once and always true, that there is still time. Even now, with the window clear and the counter undisturbed, those motions seem to linger in the air as gently as warmth. From somewhere beyond the fog, a gull calls once, then again more faintly, as if turning away over water. Beneath that, lower and steadier, comes the hush and shift of the harbor itself. Water folds against the pilings. A line rubs softly at a cleat. Very far off, almost imagined, a buoy bell offers a rounded note that reaches the terminal already softened by distance. The glass in the window gives a faint sea air rattle in its frame, not loose enough to trouble, only enough to remind you that outside there is open water, tide, night beginning. You straighten the remaining tickets, though they hardly need it. Thumb along one edge, then the other. Thick cardstock, dry and faintly cool. The printed route and time sit in their quiet rows of ink. A few are left for the crossing, a few for the return, all of them lighter now than they were at the start of the hour. You set them down squarely atop the blotter and rest the stamp beside them, parallel to the ledger, as if tucking each object into its own small berth. The window has misted a little more. In the lower pane, where the booth's warmth meets the night air, the fog outside and the breath of the room seem almost to meet one another halfway. Through that blurred patch, the nearest lamp appears larger than it is, a floating orb with no hard edge. Once in a while, a motion passes through the glow, Perhaps a sleeve. Perhaps the last of someone's coat. Perhaps only fog shifting in a current of air from the pier. Nothing asks to be identified. It is enough to notice the movement and let it soften again. The smell in the booth is gentle and layered now. Paper, old wood, lamp warmth, a trace of metal from the till, and under it all, the clean mineral scent of salt carried in from the dock. It is the smell of a place that has been quietly useful, a place that has received damp cuffs and careful questions and grateful nods, and has answered each one with the same calm hands. You listen. The harbor continues without asking anything more. The ropes creak below. Water shifts in the dark. Somewhere down the pier, a gate touches closed with a softened note, then is still. The lamp keeps shining over the counter, over the resting stamp, over the ordered stack of tickets, over the little drifting trails of condensation at the corners of the glass. And the booth, bright and small at the edge of the sea, remains there in its patient pool of light, as though it could keep watch this way for a very long time. Chapter 10. Into the quiet crossing. The light stays where it has always stayed, in its small amber circle over the counter, on the worn grain of the wood, on the pale edges of the remaining tickets, on the brass lip of the drawer left only slightly open. Beyond the glass, the fog has thickened into something almost tender, a soft white gray that takes the shape from distance and returns it as glow. The rail outside is only a line of dim gold. The pier to the right is more imagined now than seen, known by habit, by the memory of its boards, by the occasional hush of a footstep already fading, by the careful sound of a gate settling somewhere out in the mist. Inside the booth, nothing asks to be hurried. A hand rests on the counter for a moment, feeling the smoothness worn there by many evenings like this one. The wood holds a little warmth from the lamp above it. It smells faintly of varnish and old paper, with salt always present beneath. Not strong, only steady, as if the sea has quietly signed its name into everything. The stack of unused passes is gathered into a neater pile. Their cardstock is thick and matte, cool at first touch, and then quickly warmer in the hand. Edges are squared with a light tap against the blotter, one stack beside another, crossing and return. The simple order of them remains. The stamp lies nearby, dark-handled and still. Earlier, it rose and fell with that muted, familiar thud that seemed to settle each exchange into place. Now it rests where it was set down, angled slightly toward the ledger, as though waiting without expectation. The ledger remains open as well, pencil tucked in the fold, its pages holding the evening in quiet lines and figures. There is no need to close it just yet. No need to draw a firm line beneath anything. From below the dock comes the low shifting of water under the pilings. It is not a single sound, but many soft sounds together. A lift, a touch, a retreat, a hollow wash under boards, a faint tapping where something small moves against wood in the tide. A rope creaks once against a cleat, then again after a pause. The harbor answering itself in patient intervals. Farther out, almost lost in the fog, a buoy bell gives one softened note. The sound arrives rounded by distance, with no edge to it at all. The drawer is nudged a little farther in, not shut, only eased towards stillness. Coins inside answer with the gentlest click, silver against silver, copper against wood. Their neat rows remain as they were left, practical, familiar, sufficient. The little service bell by the window catches the lamp and gives back a dim point of light. It is quiet now, and has been quiet for some time. But it belongs here in the same way the stamp belongs here, and the ledger, and the tickets, and the warm pool of light itself. At the corners of the window panes, condensation has gathered into tiny beads. They hold the lamp in miniature, each one a small, trembling amber spark. Beyond them, the world has softened almost completely. The terminal lamps are only halos. The dock is a suggestion. The sea is present mostly by sound and by the coolness that lives just beyond the door. Every now and then, the booth gives a faint, familiar rattle as the sea air touches the glass. Then stillness returns, not empty, only settled. There had been footsteps earlier, and quiet questions, and hands reaching in from the mist for tickets and change. There had been damp sleeves, grateful nods, the low exchange of simple words, the repeated reassurance that there was time, plenty of time. And there was. There always was. Each traveler found the window, received what was needed, and turned gently toward the right-hand pier, where the ferry waited, somewhere beyond the veil of fog and lamplight. Now those small moments seem to linger, not as memories exactly, but as warmth left behind in the air, in the counter, in the calm order of the objects that remain. A few passes are lifted again and set down again, simply to feel their weight. The top one slides softly over the next with a dry paper whisper. The corners are aligned. The stack is placed a little farther from the edge. A thumb smooths the ledger page. The pencil is turned once between fingers and returned to its place. These are not final tasks, so much as gentle motions, familiar enough to continue without thought, quiet enough to leave wide spaces between them outside. Whatever last movement remains on the pier is absorbed almost at once by fog. A distant murmur may be voices, or water, or the ferry itself somewhere out in the whiteness. But here at the window, it all arrives softened into one continuous hush. The harbor no longer separates itself into many parts. Rope, water, lamp, mist, wood, glass, paper, night. They begin to fold together, each one carrying a little of the others. The booth stays warm. The lamp goes on, laying its honey-colored light across the counter. The panes hold their beads of moisture. The stamp rests. The tickets wait in their straightened stacks. Below, the tide keeps moving under the pilings with the same patient rhythm. And from somewhere beyond the unseen end of the dock comes the faintest suggestion of a crossing already underway. Quiet and steady, passing into the dark water as naturally as breath. And so the small booth remains at the water's edge, watchful without effort, sheltered and sheltering, while the fog drifts close around it, and the sea continues its soft, unending work.